What I want to ask you all before I get started, if you can put it in the chat, how many of you have taken at least one DNA test? Just raise your hands or say yes in the chat so I can see it. Okay, great. So when I'm talking, oh, three. That was my next question, Barry. You're jumping the gun. How many have done more than one? Or all of them? That would be me. Now, the second question. Did you find that it confirmed your family tree, or did you find some new stuff, which is also what I found out? So that's where we're going to go right here. Is this client, it's a case of mine, knew their family tree, but they couldn't figure out what happened to grandpa. So new stuff, isn't that amazing? Yeah, I have found 6 cousins, not like first cousins, but cousins, if you know what I mean, in the DNA world. So let's get started. I am sharing my screen and it looks like everybody can see it. If you have any issues or anything, please come on off mute and let me know. About me, I'm going to go through this really quick. I don't have a background in genealogy until the last 10 years. I am in what's called software systems and operations, which means to all of y'all that the system sales uses and the business uses to run, that's what I run. Part of that means you have to solve problems. And because of that, I love solving mysteries. I got started in DNA very early with the very first genetic test and just been hooked ever since. If you've gotten into the DNA world, you just kind of get hooked. Found my first half cousin, half first cousin, started figuring out who they were, and moved on from them. 2021, I quit my high-tech job because I was too stressed out to keep going and started the side business as Found Genealogy and have helped about 15 clients in that period of time. And then I went back to work about a year and a half ago. So now I only do one client at a time. Still love it, can continue to do it, and I just can't even imagine stopping. So let's move on. My clients came to me. They were first cousins. They've been doing genealogy for decades. They had a very well built out tree, and they knew the name of their great grandfather was William Palmer Gore, but they called him Palmer. They knew where he was born, sort of. They knew his approximate date of birth, and they knew that he got married and had 2 kids. And these are pictures of the family there. When his son, that's shown there on the donkey and in that picture, William was born, he disappeared sometime after that time, after he was born. They've been trying for about a decade, like I said. They've gone through paper trails, they've gone through DNA tests, and they could not figure out what happened to this guy. So this is the information they gave me, and it all starts with this background information, right? You get a lot of bits and pieces, you got to pull them together. So Ella, who was his daughter, wrote that what her father's name was, and then his son William had a delayed birth certificate that also gave the same name and a possible date of birth and a possible place of Texas. We believe it was 1881 to 1883 was his year of birth. There's a legend that this man got up on his horse, looked at his infant son and said, "You're the man of the house now," and rode away. There's also a legend that he died during the yellow fever epidemic in Texas, and he's in some mass unknown grave somewhere. In 1909, his wife Maggie, Margaret, remarried and declared that he was dead, which is not unusual. If you've been doing genealogy, you've seen that before. They've had a lot of matches, lots and lots and lots of matches, but they couldn't figure out how to piece them together. One match, her name was Jane, says she remembers this man, and she called him Uncle William Palmer Gore. And she remembers him living with them and then moving to California. And my client's theory was that their William Palmer Gore and her William Palmer Gore are actually the same, and that Palmer was actually Jane's father. There's a lot of theories that bubbled around here, and as you do this work, you find that there's just lots of theories until you get down to the meat of it. They did testing on the primary test taker. Her name was Aunt Nilda, is what they called her. That's a great aunt. She was a granddaughter of William Palmer Gore, and this is really important. It was a great DNA test because of the relationship that was so close. Like I said, most of the family have taken DNA tests trying to figure this out. Aunt Nilda was deceased at the time of this work, but her niece had the rights to the test. So in case any of you are wondering, she had the rights. So next one, a couple of the things they gave me, and I just mentioned them. I'm not going to go deep into them, but this is the Bible. This is the email from the DNA match Jane. And this is the delayed birth certificate of his son, William Glenn Gore. It's nice when you have background information like that. A lot of times you just get nothing. So here's the research question. And I bring this up because a research question is so important in this work. It helps you focus in on what you're looking for and keeps you from straying down those enticing little trails that show up when you're doing DNA testing. So our research question really is, what happened to William Palmer Gore, aka W.P. Gore, aka Palmer Gore, who was the son of Clement Conti Gore and Sarah Palmer, with a date of birth range of 1881 to 1883, who married Margaret Campbell in 1903, fathered Ella in 1904, and William Glenn in 1906, and disappeared sometime between 1906 and 1908. And what we're going to do is we're going to look at our DNA matches to our tester Nelda and only focus on the ones that are her paternal matches, which is a Gore-Palmer line. I'll show you that in a second, and ignore the maternal. And so this is another key thing when you're doing this work, is you have to ignore the extra stuff. Know who we're looking for. We are ready to go. We open up our test results and I have 20,000 DNA matches. What am I going to do? What do I do with all this? These are some of the steps that I go through when I do this work. And not to say these are all the steps or the only steps or anything of that nature. These are the steps that I go through to make sure I'm covering all my bases. And I'm not going to go through all of them in this talk. It's going to take too long, but I'm going to talk about the bold ones. So take a look at this and see if this makes sense to you. And the first one, and I'm going to go through examples in all the bold ones, is confirm the genetic family of your primary tester first. Number two is, let's get our matches right to the line we're looking for. Use the dots on Ancestry or the leads method, not message, the leads method to get these grouped correctly. Look at the trees of your highest correct matches. Then test your theories using some of the DNA tools I'm going to hit on very lightly. Add your matches to your Ancestry tree if you're using Ancestry to help build through lines information. And yes, we could have a whole other conversation about through lines. I'm just going to throw it in there as it's a hint. Build a DNA match tree. So this is important, and I'm going to show it to you later. It's actually part of every step here. I actually build my trees offline as well as online because I find it's easier to follow. And then number 8, to avoid confirmation bias, try to prove yourself wrong. Step away from your work, come back, try to prove yourself wrong, call a friend. So we're going to go through these. So next step. Step 1, confirm the biological family of your tester. And everybody says, but I know who my parents are. I know who my grandparents are. As you have probably found in this, using DNA and all these tests, some matches, you may not know who your real biological family is. Your family on paper may not match the DNA. So confirm that first. If we skip this step, we're looking for the wrong people, right? So what I did to confirm matches to agree to Nelda, to her grandfather William, and how I do that is I go up one more generation and out, looking for extra people who are connected to her great grandparents and great grandmother and great grandfather. And I'll show you what this looks like real quickly. So not the straight line, horizontal line. So this is what I did. I took Nelda her father, her grandfather, and her grandparents and said, okay, I need to know that she's actually a Palmer, right? She's actually related to Palmer Gore. So I went up one more and then found siblings to her great grandparents and went down and found DNA matches to her that were in the right relationship position for the amount of centimorgans they shared. So I look at this, I go, Nelda is William Palmer Gore's granddaughter. So this is a step that a lot of people just assume is correct and miss. So I wanted to bring that up. The next thing I'm going to do, and there's obviously, guys, there's a whole lot behind this. There's a lot more matches than what I'm showing you. There's a whole lot more work. I'm trying to just kind of distill it down to how I solve problems. So I'm jumping ahead to step 4. So we've already done our MRCA. We've grouped them, we color coded them, we put dots on them. Research our highest DNA matches and remember to the family line we're looking for. And so we talked about Jane earlier. And these are her centimorgans to Nelda and 2 or some other DNA matches that are on this list. We have MTM and Dennis Maloney, and they're actually full brothers. They both tested, which is very nice, because then we have, you know, a good range from that family and how much DNA they shared. And you can see that Jane Lawson shares only to the paternal side, which is what we want. The brothers, Maloney brothers, share only to the paternal side, which is what we want. And then this guy Dennis showed up, and I'm going to talk about him in a second. He was unknown to these genealogists who know everybody in their family. So once again, the DNA surprise hits, right? There's this guy who's shown up as a high match. We don't know who he is. But his DNA is shared to both sides, and he's unknown. So we want to make sure we don't get, confused by him. So let's start looking at the rest of step 4. Jane Lawson, we're going to go find her tree, and we're going to see if we can match things together in terms of her family, and the family of Nilda, and how they relate together in terms of centimorgans, and make sure that makes sense. So Jane matched Nilda at 327 centimorgans. And she's the one who gave the clients all that information. But the birth date she gave for the Palmer that she knew was 1921. So that can't be our Palmer, right? And her tree is just a mess. So I can't trust it. Makes no sense. And I had to create a new tree for her, a brand new research tree just for Jane. And when it came down to it, this is what it looked like. So this is Lucidchart, which you're seeing on the screen. It's a tool I use to pull just the main people out of an ancestry tree or that match on DNA and put them in a very logical format that makes it easier to understand rather than printing out your full family tree and trying to put DNA on there. It turns out her father was Matt Carlton Gore, and her grandfather was Henry Clement Gore, whose father was Clement Cotty Grower. So the grandfather, her grandfather, is a brother of Palmer Gore. So she's not the daughter of Palmer like my clients thought. Her uncle, she did have an uncle with the same name, William Palmer Gore. So her grandfather named one of his sons after his brother. And so that's where you get that confusion in the family of, well, she has a William Palmer Gore and we have a William Palmer Gore. Are they the same William Palmer Gores? No, they're not. You know, common naming in families where they reuse names over and over. So it's not the same person we're looking for, but it still is a good lead. Now let's look at the brothers Maloney. Their tree was very clear that their grandfather was named Walter Gore, who died in 1959 in Montana. They had a lot of paperwork, some obituaries, marriage certificates, no birth certificates. The birth date that was given was 1883, which was interesting. Unfortunately, Walter Gore only had 3 daughters, so we couldn't use Y-DNA testing to be helpful there. One thing about this tree, they weren't maintaining it. They had a niece, I think, who was very into genealogy. So, and she was somebody I was able to reach out to. and talk to her about stuff. So it was a really nice tree and I didn't have to redo it. But once again, I wanted to pull the matches out to show the family and how they relate to each other in terms of DNA. And our last one, like I said, is Dennis. He matches at 493 centimorgans, which is pretty high for an unknown person, and it got everybody very excited. But, and this is the big but, his matches were not only to Gore, but to Campbell, their maternal side. Means there's something else going on here, which is very interesting, but he can't help me with what happened to Palmer. So this person is set to the side and was investigated later. And if we have time, if you care, I'll tell you how he's related. So 5. These are the tools if you've done DNA and you've tried to figure out what the relationship is. A couple of the tools I use almost always open on my computer is DNA Painter, shared centimorgan tool, right? It also has the new one where you can put 2 DNA matches in there to your tester. Caveat is, if you use that part of the tool, they have to be on the same relationship level. So for Nelda, I can put the 2 Maloney brothers in there because they're the same relationship level to each other. If it was like a father-son, you couldn't use it. So that's just a little tip for you if you're using that tool. Don't put in different generational levels. Watto tool, which is a little bit more complicated. If you are just struggling because there's just too many possible relationships, you can use the Watto tool. It can be a little confusing. I've used it on very complicated trees. This one I didn't really need to. I did throw it in there just to make sure it seemed correct, that it came out with the same conclusion I did. A couple other things to mention is when you're using these tools, they give you ranges or percentages of possibility. Your matches should be within a reasonable range of possibility. If you're trying too hard, you may be putting in matches and saying, well, it's 2% is still possible. I really don't find that has happened. I've not found a 2% match that actually is that relationship. So try to remember that. Try to think to yourself, is this within the range of probability, not just possibility, when you're looking at these relationships and these tools? I'm not saying it doesn't happen. It does happen, but it's very rare. So that's step 5. And I'm going to show you the tool here. So this is Jane. So she has 327 centimorgans, and you can see that puts her very nicely in a first cousin once removed position, matches our family tree because they share grandparents, as we found out when we built the family tree for ourselves. What we're looking for in this situation is relationships that the DNA says are the most possible, but don't match our family tree. And this one, she matches very nicely, so I'm going to go ahead and say she is who we think she is. So you'll see how this works with the dual matches. I can do that because they're same generational level. And they're showing up as a first cousin once removed, just like Jane, but there's something about this that's bothering me. If you've ever seen siblings tested and their relationship to one tester, you will very rarely see this close of a match where both of them are this high. You'll usually see something like up and down, you know. It's kind of interesting to me, and this was bothering me when I started looking at this, that both of these brothers were so high. 643 and 511 is really high. I know it's within range, but it's still very high. So I'm taking all this information, and remember I use the charting tool, like I said, to kind of help me visualize this in a crisper format, easier format. So for me, this shows that something's wrong with the Maloney brothers because they are so high. And there's no endogamy. And I know a lot of you are like, what about endogamy? I can't find any endogamy. One side of my family is Cajun, so you can guess a lot of endogamy. I don't see that here. I'm now looking at Walter Gore as my prime target because of this amount of DNA that both of his grandsons share. And then I start looking at Walter's life. Walter just kind of materialized in Montana just before he got married to Julia. There's no trail of him before. And his documentation starts lining up really nicely with William. So let's keep going. I'm going to show you why, but this is what I came up with, that William and Walter are actually the same man. Walter Gore, very well documented after his marriage with Julia, nothing before Julia. William Gore, some documentation, not great, but we know where he was up until 1906, 1907. As we build out this tree, you can see this is kind of, if you see where I put him as the same person, these DNA matches, this amount of centimorgans now makes sense to Nelda as half first cousins instead of first cousin once removed. Makes a lot more sense when you start putting it in these diagrams. And you can see others are all in line. So once again, I'm checking for endogamy to see these people who I know I have descendants of. Are they in line? They're in line. So things are making sense here to me. But, and this brings me to step 8. I got my theory. I think I've got it proven. But my step 8 is when I want all of you to really, really think hard about when you're doing this work. Prove yourself wrong. Try to prove yourself wrong, whatever it takes. To prove myself wrong, I did build a timeline. I'm going to show you real quickly what that looks like for both Palmer and Walter's life, side by side. If in that timeline I can show that during the same time period, there are 2 separate individuals in 2 separate locations, I'm wrong, right? If they're not at the right location at the right time to father a child, I'm wrong. Number 2, I use all the time. Ask somebody who knows this work to look at my work. I don't tell them my hypothesis. I say, okay, I'm going to run this by you. What do you think? Then I tell them my hypothesis and ask them to tear it apart. I think it's important to use our network of friends and other people who really understand what this type of work does. And then I look for conflicting or confirming matches. Once you've got a theory like this, the only way to disprove it is say, if this is true, then they should not match a person from this lineage, or they should match a person from this lineage. See if you can find those spots. The easiest way I find them is to look at the wives. If you're saying this person is a descendant of Sarah Palmer and Clement Conti Gore, then they should also be a DNA match to those other relations that are lateral to those 2 people. So start thinking through your head, what DNA matches would disprove this or which would prove it, okay? And this is an example of a timeline I do. When I have all of this information, I want to put this timeline together and make sure that I can prove that both of these men are the same person because they weren't in the same place, weren't in different places at the same time, that they were in the right place at the right time. And this really helps get your facts lined up so you can see them. And hopefully you guys use timelines as well. I didn't use them for a lot of cases, but I have found recently that they have become really, really important in terms of laying out all these dates we have to deal with. So using this, I find no evidence of Walter before he got married and no evidence of Palmer after he disappears from Texas. With that, as well as the DNA matches and a thing I'm going to show you next, I believe that Walter is William Palmer. And this is a picture of Walter and his second wife, Julia. And this is a picture of my client's grandfather, William Glenn Gore, his son. So that is the story of how I figured out this one. And now I'm going to stop sharing so I can see things.
You said you were going to tell us about Dennis, the other DNA match.
Yes.
I think we're curious about him.
Oh, and so were my clients. They were super excited about him. So Dennis turned out to be the grandson of William Glenn Gore, this other man in the picture. So somewhere along the line in Texas, there was an MPE, and he showed up, and we contacted his daughter, and the daughter was in no contact with her father, unfortunately. But we were able to prove by DNA matches that Dennis was actually a Gore and not a Moncrief, which is his last name. So it's kind of amazing what pops up when you start going into these matches, how many different things and people and events have happened. But I see.
So the family didn't know that he was not a Moncrief. They just were testing for fun. Oh boy.
They were testing for fun. And that happens all the time.
Yeah, it does.
It's
Somebody
really,
says something about, are there free lucid charts? And I don't use lucid charts. You do, right?
I use it. That's what I use a lot of. And I do have a paid subscription. I think it's $95 a year, if I'm right. There are versions of this. You can also use Microsoft Word. You know, they have little boxes, whatever works best for you. I am not I'm not the person who draws things out by hand because that just gets too messy. So Lucid Chart for me, and I see somebody has helped with that, Scalpel and Latte. There are lots of them. Just look for charting tools. Google even has them, right? So you just have to get one that you're comfortable with, and then you have to use it over and over and over.
I'm the person that draws them out by hand.
I can't lose track of
Yeah,
what
it gets messy. Somebody was asking about Watto. Can you go to the Watto site and share your screen with us?
Sure, it's the
And
same site.
just kind of show the people a little bit about what you were talking about with that, maybe, since that was a question. I answered it, but I just said Watto's at Dana or at DNA Painter. Yeah.
It's at the same site. So this is
Yeah.
dnapainter.com.
Mm-hmm.
The chromosome mapping, I'm not really into chromosome mapping. If you're there, it's got a great tool. This is the shared centimorgan tool, which I showed you a couple times, and this is Watto. Oops, sorry. Oh, did I just click into the guide? I clicked into the guide. Sorry, they moved it.
Yeah, they did. It looks different to me.
Something's moved. Let's go here.
Maybe if you go up to,
Here it is.
oh, no.
No, I want the free
What
one.
if you go to, I don't know, they moved it around, but what if you go to the web page and do
Yeah.
pull down the menu?
Mm-hmm. Here we go.
There it is. Yep.
I just Googled it. Love Google. This is what when you start it, it's blank, right? So it's just like you have to enter, and this is part I think you can upload. I haven't used the upload. You can enter people in here manually, and it gives you a hypothesis. If I log in, I can actually probably show you one that I've done. Let me see if I can sign in real quick, guys. Oh, of course, now I have to log in over here. Uno segundo.
Sorry, I put you on the spot there.
You did. I thought I had this all done too.
I could,
Okay.
oh, okay, you got it?
So unless somebody has one. Yeah, it's not working. Okay, so this is how I do it. You would say, I want your person, you put in your information, and then you're going to add people, right? So you're going to add people by their birth year, their death year, and then you will say, let's say 1942, and you can say they're a male. You can do as much as you want to on here, but then you'll see here, intermatch CM. Can you see that? It's tiny. So you can say 423. As you start doing this, it builds out a tree for you and it'll come up with a hypothesis. And the hypothesis will range from like negative 40% to 1,352%. So it can be quite a few things for you.
I have
It's
something
cool.
saved in my Watto, but I can't show it because it's not privatized, so.
Yeah. Dana Leeds method is obviously she's the grandmother of all this, even though she's not that old, but you know what I mean. The godmother of it.
Okay, somebody says, can you show the list of steps again from the beginning of your talk where you had that screen that had the 7 steps, I believe?
Yeah, I can show that again. Like I said, this isn't all encompassing. You guys may have something else, but these are steps I just use to remind myself when I'm doing this kind of work. Have you done this? Did you skip that? Sometimes I don't need to do it. I don't have to go through all the steps. I had a client recently who she had a half uncle test. I mean, that's about as easy as you can get to find a grandfather that you don't know. You know, it's like, well, it's his dad. Um, so sometimes you don't need it. But like I said, the biggest thing for me is a lot of people skip number 1 and number 8. Don't skip those. Just don't skip them. It will save you so much time.
Okay, then I think it's the next slide after. They want to see the one that has DNA Painter and Watto steps. The page where you have, I think the URLs.
Okay, yeah. This one?
That one. I
There's
think
your
that's the one.
Yeah. And this is like what it looks like when you do it. Oh, I just opened the Q&A.
Okay. And Mary says, is Watto paid? And there's a paid version of Watto, but you can do all of this that you're showing for free with a free
All of this
version,
is
right?
free. Yeah, I have yet to see a need to do the paid version. There's also an advancement on DNA Painter for the Shared Center Morgan project. It's called Banyan Tree. So if you have the one problem with DNA Painter, this tool is it doesn't deal with endogamy. So if you've got a lot of cousin marriages, a lot of pedigree collapse, just on and on and on, this tool doesn't quite work if it's too close. But Banyan Tree does, and that's paid. So there are other tools out there. I just like this one.
Someone says, any recommendations when all your matches are third cousin and more distant?
Ah, that's a hard one. I would ask if they've tested everywhere. One thing I find is most people, obviously, if you've done this, most people only test at one site. So if I have a client who's only tested at one site, I will tell them, go download your DNA, go to MyHeritage, go upload it, especially if they're looking for people in Europe. Make sure you take in all the tests. But sometimes you just can't. There's only one way I can tell you to do it, and that's look at the wives. If you're following the paternal line and you're looking at the DNA matches for a paternal line, and you're trying to prove it's one of these 4 or 5 couples that are 2-3 generations away, see if you can find a match to the wife's family. That usually will clear it up. If you can find a match that's the sister of a wife that married into the line you're investigating, you basically have proven your point. You shouldn't have any DNA with that person if that's not your direct line. So there are tricks. It just gets really, really hard when you get that far back.
Yeah, and this person didn't really tell us what they were looking for.
No.
So we don't really know why, what his research question is, I guess.
Yes, exactly. No, I can't share the slides, but if there's something in here you like, that you want me to copy the steps, I'll copy those into there. If somebody's asking if I can share the slides.
Yeah, this will be available on our YouTube, so you can watch it again and
Mhm.
take notes and go over it and try to you could stop the video and rewatch it.
Yeah,
Kind of
and you can write the notes
so,
down. Yeah, you can't just, you
Yeah.
can't just put them out there. But it's probably the last time I'm doing this one. I've got some new ones since then, so I'm gonna have to come up with something new. But
Cool.
it was fun, especially with these two cousins. And they were just so into this.
So the family just thinks that he changed his name. He moved to Montana, changed his name
did.
to kind of get away from the first marriage that he didn't divorce
He
from.
did. He didn't divorce her. He just rode away. And this has been an ongoing, since this case, I probably have 3 or 4 of similar. The one I'm working on right now, he changed his name twice, ran away from 2 families. And you know, it's before the internet, right? Before computers. You could pick up and move from Texas to Montana and nobody knew who you were. So it is interesting that way.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, there are lots of, yeah, thank you for that, Janice. There are lots of how-to videos, how to use DNA Painter, how to use Watto. And of course, if you have not read Blaine Bettinger's book, if you're new to this, he also explains that too. Blaine Bettinger is the designer of Watto and DNA Painter, him with Johnny Pearl. Lots of information out there for you guys.
I feel like there's also some Watto and DNA Painter how-tos at Roots Tech, the Roots Tech videos that are online,
Yep,
and those are free.
and then on YouTube.
Oh, yes, on YouTube. Yeah, just YouTube it and
Mhm.
search for Watto or What Are the Odds. It stands for What Are the Odds.
Yeah. Lots of information out there. Oh, sorry, what was that book? The Family Tree Guide to DNA Testing and Genetic Genealogy. It is your basic primer, especially if you're getting into this for the first time. What I love about this is it gives you examples and exercises to work through to kind of make it make sense. So it's one I do recommend for everybody who it's just like, I don't get it. What's mtDNA? What's y-DNA? What's a chromosome? Like, you need some basics. You don't need to be a huge scientist, but you need some basic information. Oh, there you go.
Yeah, I
Blaine's book.
think it's the best basic book.
It is, absolutely. Oh, it went faster than my in-person ones. When I do this in person, it takes like 45 minutes to an hour, so this went much faster.
Well, I think we might have answered all the questions.
Yeah, well, thank you very much, guys.
And thank you. I think, Julie, everyone seemed to enjoy it, and people loved the case studies, they said in the chat. And so remember, everybody, to come to our program next Tuesday. And thank you again, Julie. And I think
Thank
we'll
you.
sign off and say good night.
Good night. Bye.